Thank you for tuning in to Divine Times. My name is Hilton Milan, and I'm here with our special guest, Sajel Bellon. Sajel, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Hilton.
You know, we met at an airport
We did.
a little while ago,
Yeah.
and I was so impressed with what you told me. You have a doctorate
Yes.
what was it again?
So my doctorate was actually research on flourishing firefighters. And it's around the examination of the culture, the firefighting culture, emergency services,
Yes.
the mental health, and some of the trauma that they face.
So, in everyone's lifetime, we all come across times when we have a need for first responders, whether it be police, fire, paramedics.
Absolutely. And we're usually at our worst when we're
Yes.
expecting them to be at their best.
My gosh. So all of your work is in, occupational stress and trauma specialist?
Well, it's funny because it started out to be occupational stress, but what's really come to light for me is that it's not just occupational, because the stress transfers over to our homes and our family life as well. Because we're one being, and we move in and out of our home space to our workspace and many other spaces. And we're still that same being. And so the stress comes with us. And it impacts then the people that we're with.
You come by this honestly, don't you?
I do. I've gone through it personally. And that's why it's such an important message, an important part of my work, because I now have so many different lenses that come at the issue, right? I have the academic lens, I have the research lens, the actual organizational cultural lens, the intimacy of what happens within the emergency services, that lens, but then most importantly, as the spouse of an emergency responder, as the person who's actually had to live it, the good times and the bad times, and how we've made it through. And so it became very apparent to me when we were at our lowest point that at least I knew what to do at that stage because of what I do.
Yes.
But what about everybody else? All the other spouses or family members or friends that are finding themselves in this lowest moment and don't know what to do. What about them? How many families could we be saving? How many marriages could we be saving? How many lives could we be saving? And so that's where my missions come from.
My gosh. So what are some of the key elements, that, we as a civilization and culture need to understand to be able to support your work, and so that it can be championed and understood and resolved?
For the first and probably the most profound is the understanding of human connection and what that means. And one of the vehicles that we can use towards human connection is simply conversation. The power of our words. And then the power of our words create the space. And creating psychologically safe spaces for us to be able to have these conversations. And don't shy away from the difficult ones, because those are the ones that have the greatest impact.
So could you give us an example of some of the difficult ones?
Sure. So my husband, as I mentioned, is a firefighter.
Yes.
And one day he came home and he was different. And normally when he comes home and he's different, 24 hours, 48 hours later, life gets back to normal. We normalize, we adapt. This one was different.
Did he tell you about it before?
No, there was absolutely no indication. All I knew is that he just wasn't the same. And it lasted longer than normal. We were going on to weeks, and we had sort of like behavior that wasn't what I would say was normal for him. He was getting very angry, where he's not a very angry person. And, I used to joke it off and say, oh, I'm public enemy number one today, because I knew he had a difficult shift, or I could tell that he did. And so I just knew to stay out of his way. But this one was different. It just lasted longer. He just wasn't the same. He was very disconnected, withdrawn. Something was wrong. And I was, asking him if we could connect and somehow, get him to open up. And I wasn't successful in doing that. I reached out to family. Family told me to leave him alone. Don't provoke him. But I'm so glad I didn't listen to that advice, because I don't think he'd be with us if I did. And I know that for a fact because he told me so. So I'm so glad that I followed my own gut and I continued to try and connect with him. And we actually reached a breaking point where I was going to have to make a decision to leave the person that I adore most in this world, because we just couldn't live in this environment anymore. And so I basically sat him down and said, whatever the repercussions of that conversation was going to be, I said to him, you've forced me into a corner where I'm going to have to now make a decision that I don't want to make. And I think you need to know, where we're at, because I don't want to catch you off by surprise. I want you to know that this was something I really had to think long and hard about. And I don't want to do it, but I'm going to have to. So either you're going to have to, let me in, or something has to change, because we just can't keep doing what we're doing.
So in that instant,
Yeah.
did you know what had happened, or had he seen
No.
something or experienced, or he hadn't
No,
communicated?
I knew nothing. All I knew is that life as we knew it was unlivable.
And that's both you, and you have a daughter as well,
I
yes?
have 2 children that I had
Yes.
to look out for. Yeah.
And were they
so-
sensitive to this, or did they perceive the
Absolutely.
change? Yes.
I could see the dynamics were very different at home, and I was looking out for their well-being. And I know as a father that's what he would want me to do as a mother, is to put their well-being first, and that's what I was doing.
Right.
And that's why I was trying to tell him that I'm going to have to make this decision, because if it was just me, I would find ways to deal.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's what I do. I have
Yes.
my humor and everything else. But for the children, it wasn't good for them. And I know that as a father, and he's such a loving dad, that he wouldn't want that. So I needed to tell him that whatever I was going to do next was for the children, and it's not something that I want to do. But that moment is when things changed, because I think he actually heard me. And he completely broke, and was crying and sobbing, and sharing with me what it was he was going through, flashbacks, memories, nightmares, sounds, smells, things that he just couldn't get out of his
Was
head.
this from one event,
It
or
was-
was this a cumulative?
Well, it was one event that brought it on, but it brought back 10 years worth of what he had seen and experienced. So it was just too much. And, I know I should have been just reeling with him. And yes, I was very compassionate to his pain and his grief and what he was going through. But I gotta say, I was a little bit relieved and even hopeful, because now I knew, because I knew what I know and I
Yes.
know what to do, this was a sign of hope for me, that I know how to deal with this. I know what to do. I know this can be helped. I know he can come out of this. Whereas before that conversation, it was a very hopeless situation. So just that conversation in of itself opened up a whole new door, not only for him to feel safe and be able to open up and to get a chance to get his life back, but for me to get my husband and my marriage back too.
So for first responders,
Yeah.
There's so much that, most civilians, like myself, can hardly even imagine.
Right.
And so are there any protocols or processes when a first responder is witnessing, a death or survival, but like unthinkable survival through and rescue? Are there automatic, processes by these organizations to help the first responders?
They do have some things in place, and the intentions are good, but the fact of the matter is these situations are not cookie cutter. So even if you do experience something bad and someone comes in right after the shift to do a debrief or a check-in, these things may not happen for 2 or 3 days, sometimes a week. Vincent went back to work 2 more shifts after the initial incident because he himself did not know what was happening or what was going on with him. It wasn't till a week later that we discovered that, wait a minute, there's something really, really wrong here. It took time. And unfortunately, our systems or protocols, as you talk about, they're not necessarily sensitive to the dynamic and authentic or organic evolution of what's happening in each and every individual.
Are there regular sort of emotional, mental checkpoints just as a result of, like I don't know how many deaths or how many, hospitalizations, one experiences and the cumulative effect of that. So are there regular sort of audits?
No, there's not. And there's not even a protocol or mandate in place where people can see somebody on a regular basis. It's all by choice. And right now, many of us, and not just first responders, many of us choose to go through mental health issues on our own. There's a stigma.
Truly.
There's their fear of being labeled. There's a fear that, why do I need help? I'm fine. We put on that brave face, and we're essentially waging these wars internally, totally on our own. And that's the issue. And that's why my mission is to really allow people to recognize the answer is within us. We have all the organizations, governments, people are, scratching their heads and trying to do more research, trying to find out how we can put things in place. When there's one thing that will not cost us a dime, and that is at the hands and feet of all of us, is our ability to connect with another human being. Yes, our programs are wonderful. Yes, there's good things to be gained by doing research and putting new services into place. But just imagine the amount of people that we can affect, the amount of people that don't have to go to the extreme end of trauma or isolation or suicide, if we as a community and as a society could really tap into our ability to connect with another human being. And not just during times of crisis. I mean every day,
Yes.
all the time. Imagine what society would be like if you felt psychologically safe no matter where you went, or knew that somebody had your back no matter where you were.
And having our back is not just when we're in the high stress,
No,
of having to just, we have to do what we have to do.
no. It's about having the right people in place to celebrate your joys with and to wipe away your tears when you have them. Somewhere where you feel completely safe.
So, for any of our, or most of our first responders, they work very much on the hero's journey
Yes.
of, having to be strong, do the right things, and just like face whatever and do what's necessary to save lives.
Right.
And so is there some attachment to just being that strong person all the time?
Absolutely. I think there's a certain element where they need to be in that mindset to be able to be on the ground and dealing with their scenario.
Yes.
So there's definitely a place for that mindset, and they have to have it to be able to do what they do. However, I also think it's really important to recognize that as human beings, we're all exposed to trauma.
Yes.
At some point in our lives, we all go through difficult times,
Yes.
but we're wired to be resilient.
Yes.
We've been blessed with that component of our brain that's able to process what we see and what we do, and it puts it behind us, and we're able to move forward. We're naturally resilient. But what happens when you put just a regular human being in a uniform and then put them continuously in the face of trauma? There's a point where your brain cannot process everything as efficiently or as well as we normally would. And so it's only inevitable that after a certain accumulation of time, unless you have those points of connection, points of where you're sort of really boosting your well-being, that you're going to end up in a situation that you can't overcome on your own.
In the boosting your well-being, have you created, or are there programs, or are there ones that you would like to see created, that will do so on a regular basis, whether it be monthly, quarterly, annually?
Yeah, like there's a lot of workshops and a lot of strategies and interventions out there, and a lot of being offered in terms of boosting well-being and resiliency. What I'm creating, though, is something that's very systemic. So it begins from right from the beginning, the training of a first responder at the college level, right through to retirement and beyond. I want to create systemic change. I want to create change that's actually embedded within the whole culture and that extends beyond the culture into the communities. So it's about creating something that is specific and that honors their hierarchy and the systemic things that they need to have in place in order to do their jobs, but also to know that it's something that extends beyond the job. So that's something that I'm definitely working on, and it's being designed as we speak.
Oh, yeah, that's exciting.
So, yeah,
That's exciting. And does this also include military?
it does. Yeah.
Are there any other groups that are in high exposure to that trauma that we need to be mindful of?
So this is the interesting thing. My focus was so much on the emergency services, but the more that I've been getting out there and talking to people, I'm recognizing that it's not just our first responders, military, police, paramedic, firefighters. This is really becoming something that I'm seeing in the medical field, in the legal field, education field. So I'm recognizing that it's not about what we do in terms of occupation as much as it is a human thing. So I'm approaching it from a very dynamic, layered, systemic view, but from a human perspective, that this is something that we can all benefit from.
So even teachers,
Absolutely.
whether it be primary or
Yeah.
at any level, and currently in curriculum,
Yeah.
to be any kind of professional, is well-being universal in the training and how to
It's certainly becoming recognized. So positive education is on a comeback. And that's really, really exciting. And positive education is marrying our emphasis of academics with well-being. And so that we are really creating a culture and community of children who will become our adults, who are really resilient and have better experiences with life. We're enhancing their quality of life. And it's really exciting because post-secondary institutions are really recognizing this. There was a huge event that we had in Dallas this past summer. We had over 1,000 attendees at the World Positive Education Accelerator, where we had stakeholders from all levels of the system, educators, students, parents, policymakers, where we all came out to talk about how to embed positive education within the school systems. What I loved about it was it's not just about putting it into the curriculum, it's actually putting it into the culture of the organization. And that also then kind of brought in my scope that we can do that within our organizations, our corporations. Why aren't we? And that would then also help people, no matter what industry we're in, to experience better life, feel better at work, perform better, and have better outcomes. This not only helps the organization, but again, helps the individual and teams as well.
Would this go as far even in corporations or not-for-profits that are threatened by losses and then the sustainability of the organization? And if so, what would some of the programs look like to actually help individuals at all levels?
So the program would be something that leaders would really have to consider buying into as well, because if you can get leadership to buy into the concept of becoming a positive institution or positive organization, then it's a lot easier to have implementation throughout the organization. And you need to have it at all angles. So it's not just about saying, hey, we're going to be a better well-being focused organization, so we're going to give you longer lunch breaks. It's got to be taken at the performance level where you're incorporating it right into your performance management systems, into your HR, right through to the way you run meetings. It becomes a cultural aspect. And that's what I'm really trying to emphasize to people, is that you can't just change it in a silo. because
Yes.
then you're spending money and you're not going to create sustainable outcomes.
Yes.
In fact, you'll be running through money and resources and not getting the effects that you want. Versus where if we really come at it from a cultural perspective, right from the ground up, then you're going to create a system that flourishes.
When you speak of coming at it from a cultural standpoint,
Yeah.
you- what's missing right now? What has to change? What are the challenges?
We're not coming together as a culture, as a people, as a group.
So, for instance, do we break the culture down into like Canadians, or Americans, or
No, it's not about ethnicity
Oh,
as
right.
it is about the cultures in which you live in. So, for example, within a company, if you're working within a company, that company has a culture.
Yes.
So, if you want to create change, you got to create change involving everybody.
And that's right. If it's manufacturing, it's right down to
It doesn't matter what industry.
It's from right down to the janitors.
Absolutely. So right now in the emergency services, for example, there's so many different players. You have the municipal funding people that have a stake in what's being done. You have the leadership within the department. You have the professional associations, and everybody's doing their own thing. And what's happening is within that community, then it's the front line that are kind of trying to figure out which services to use, which training to go to, what's available to them. It's not servicing them because everyone's trying to do their own thing versus what if we were to look at it from, again, a very systemic level and look at working in coordination with each other to really maximize the change. And what I'm trying to do is empower the front line to say, you are the beginning of change. You can change your culture. Because just by creating connections within your teams and extending beyond your teams, changing the way we talk about mental health, that's how we'll get leadership to recognize what actually needs to be done and how to best help, as well as the associations and government and everybody else. But we ourselves need to change the way we're talking about mental health.
And mental health, then, we have an awareness these days of, non-bullying, not tolerating bullying, not tolerating abuse. But we look at that in that sort of victim paradigm and, and tyrant paradigm, and also the rescuer. But beyond that drama triangle, there's also the people that witness that, even in the janitors. If there's a cleanup crew, how much visually can someone sustain in visually observing trauma, if not right at the beginning, even in the cleanup? Audio, how much can people take in witnessing suffering?
Everyone's different.
So how does everyone need to have sort of a well-being assessment, on a regular basis, and positivity to actually cause the culture to grow? Is this the shift that you're speaking of?
You could do assessments, and I've heard of departments going in that direction. But assessments, again, are paper and become protocol. It's a checkbox. Is it really creating change, or is it just one more thing? And if you can do an assessment, but if there's no follow-through in terms of what needs to be done or what happens after, what good is the assessment? So what I'm proposing is let's change the way we talk and the way we connect.
Okay.
Because then everybody can become their own assessor and have the freedom to exercise what they need when they need it. Because, again, everyone's going to respond to trauma differently and different kinds of trauma. Everyone's going to have a different set point in terms of what they can take and what they can't take. What we need to do is learn how we can feel comfortable and safe enough to be able to talk about what we're feeling and how we're feeling it in order to explore when we need help. And to feel free to be able to go and get that help. And we can only do that if we create a culture in which we are accepted in doing that.
Would it be useful for our audience to, take the glasses off to actually see through this conversation, some of the firsthand things that you're aware of or events that you're aware of are trauma, so that we can open up our imaginations to what we can hardly perceive. What's going to actually help us wake up to embracing this? I'm not sure where to take this with you.
Right. I think the wake up is there, especially for those of us that have been touched by it. There's not a day that goes by that I don't hear about either a family breaking up, a first responder taking their own life, or a spouse feeling like they're not enough. I think the wake up call is there. It's whether we're prepared to hear it and to acknowledge it.
I may be on the wrong track here, but how many deaths can one witness, or how much blood, or how much screaming?
Again, it's all different. It's all different. And it's not about what my husband's breaking point, for example, he's seen a lot in his last 14 years.
Yes.
He's recovered boys from young children from a lake. He has seen people's faces come off in accidents. He's seen dismemberment in suicides. He has seen all kinds of things. What really affected him this time was the recovery. He was recovering the bodies of 3 young people that had been burned alive. And he was recovering their bodies. And, I could see that he was in that mode of processing, and what he's came home to was the news and their faces of what they looked like before. And that connection, that humanizing aspect, I think, is what took him over.
Okay.
So, and again, that's not going to be for everybody. Like I
No.
said, this is a very, very individual journey. Many of people will look for different ways of coping. Some will be healthy, some will be not healthy in terms of drinking, gambling, addictions of any kind,
Yes.
drugs,
Yes.
and medication even.
Yes.
So like I said, everyone's journey is the same. The commonality, the common thread that, like I said, that I've been really come to understand is the thing that's going to help people the most in promoting well-being, preventing mental health reactions to trauma, and really helping those that do require post-care is human connection. Human connection will promote our well-being, which will make us better to respond to things that we see and hear and experience. It will prevent the likelihood of deep depressions or reactions to trauma, and it actually helps us in recovery. It's the common thread. And so I would love for people to turn their focus away from the ailments and move it towards the solution. And the solution is to build cultures in which we can have open, honest conversations and create stronger human connection.
So in families where the first responder or professional doesn't have the family, or this family doesn't have the resources or the skill sets
Right.
to open up or to hear or receive, even though they may have the compassion or empathy.
It's a skill. It's a real skill. So that's what I do now, is I teach people and help them to understand language and the words that we choose, the words that we use, the words that we hear. A perfect example I can give you is
Yes.
today, busy as I was trying to get to where I needed to be, my husband was at an appointment and was expected to be home, didn't make it on time. I had one of his guys call to say that they were coming. I needed to rush home. There was a lot of chaos.
Yes.
And he didn't check his phone to see what was going on. And then I got a call probably about 10 minutes before I needed to leave saying that I just got your message. I'm on my way. I'm like, well, your people are coming. I need to be somewhere. I'm not sure, what to do. And he immediately got on the defensive to say, well, how am I supposed to know? And I said, look, I don't know why you're getting upset. I'm not mad at you. So let's clarify that right now. I'm not mad. So no need to be on the defensive. This is just simply logistics, and we're going to work it out. You're on your way. I will stay put till, I can, and it'll all work out. Whereas that could have turned into a huge
could have
fight.
escalated
It could have
into- yeah,
escalated.
yes.
So it's about, again, learning how to communicate effectively, having conversations, despite how difficult they can be or challenging, but to do them in a way that we can each hear each other and then share openly with each other. So it's about creating that safe space. And so that's what I do now.
Boy, and it sounds like it's not only with other people, we need to find and learn how to create and support that safe space even within ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's the whole science behind self-compassion. And I will tell you that this has been the last 2 years have been the most difficult of my life. I've experienced a lot of challenges and turbulence in my life.
Yes.
And it's been, this has been the most challenging because usually if you have something that's not good for you or not good for you psychologically, we can disconnect from it, get rid of it, purge it from our life.
Yeah.
And here, that's not what I wanted to do. I was with somebody that I adore absolutely to the ends of the earth, and just the idea of purging that aspect of my life was not an option. And actually, it was an option, but I really didn't want to make it.
Yes.
And so, I kind of lost track there.
Now, in the self-compassion.
The self-compassion. So
Yes.
self-compassion
Yes.
has been my saving grace in the last 2 years, because I've had to go through this journey with him, and there's been very difficult times, but it's been a time of discovery, not just for him, but for me. And I do believe that I've become a better person from it, a better wife, and a better person in terms of now being able to go out into the world and helping others because I understand.
It actually sounds like that might be the beginning point, self-compassion.
It really, it's what got me through, and this whole experience has been the launch pad to discovering ourselves as individuals, as well as a couple, but now also in terms of what are we supposed to do with this? And I think that's where the divine comes in, is that I always knew that I was supposed to do something with this knowledge
Yes.
that I have,
Yes.
but it's really sort of pinpointed it for me. It's given me a new lens, and so I'm actually better equipped, probably more than most, because where some people will be equipped with professional knowledge, I now have both the professional and the personal experience. And so I bring a totally new view. I bring the empathy. I bring the compassion for it that perhaps others may not have yet.
What are some of the beginning steps for an individual to practice self-compassion and to also begin, as one is practicing it here, to then attempt to teach it to the others that are important in their lives?
I think we need to know it ourselves before we can teach it.
So how do we come to know it
And so
ourselves?
coming to know it, there's been a lot of research around it, and I loved Kristen Neff's work, and her...
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And her definition is basically self-compassion is being mindful, meaning in the present moment,
Yes.
without judgment, towards ourselves. So one way that I introduce a lot of my clients to it is we open up the discussion with, so have you ever had a friend that you've had to comfort that was going through a difficult time? What were some of the things that you said to them? Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. You haven't done anything wrong. You're going to get through this. Whatever the case may be, we're always very empathetic and compassionate towards our friends and the
Yes.
people that we love. Now imagine turning that inward. So give yourself the same scenario where something's gone wrong. What do we first do? Our first inkling is our self-critic comes out. Oh, you're so stupid. I can't believe you did that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's our
I
inner
should have known
dialogue.
better.
I should have known better. And we tend to beat ourselves down. Well,
So-
you know what? My call to you today is to please turn that self-compassion inward. Tell yourself it's going to be okay. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. It's okay to talk about what you need to talk about. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking just to get better.
For process and progress.
Absolutely. I went through a lot of guilt, not only that I didn't see what was happening to my husband all these years, and that I didn't do something sooner. I had all the dialogues going on in my head. Was I being a good mother? Was I being a good wife? You know what? Yes. Yes and yes. Mm-hmm. And I allowed myself to go through what I was feeling. I was going through a depression myself.
Yes.
And I allowed myself to do that. And I think that was part of my process in healing.
How does one have compassion for themselves when they're in such a dark place, and in spite of, yes, we're going to get through it, but what are some of the practical steps to actually move through that?
It's a mindset, like I said, to remember to be in the present moment, not to beat ourselves up over past things, which we tend to do.
Yes.
We tend to ruminate. So to stay in the current present moment, maybe focus on what is going right, what you are doing that's okay and successful. What about you has gotten you through past events, right? If we begin to appreciate ourselves.
Yes.
Of how we got here today, and without judgment, right?
Yeah.
Because again, that's the key piece, is without judgment.
What about fear of the future then? Because if even if one survives up to now, if one hasn't found the path to change or transformation, then the future looks like it'll be a repeat of the past. How does one get through that?
Again, I'm going to take us back to the language and the power of our words. You said fear of the future. What if I said to you, what about your preferred future?
Nice.
So, as
and
I
if
said,
one is doubtful or uncertain of it?
that's okay. That's all part of the journey, right? And so I want to come back to, again, what is really profound of what I've learned is it's the power of our words and our ability to have meaningful conversation and to cultivate connection.
What are some of the most powerful words we can look forward to? I loved preferred future. How do we deal with past that are filled with trauma and then relanguage that?
Well, again, I would look to see, you're here now. So my question is, how did you get here? What were some of the things that you did? What were some of the things about you that got you from your past to now? Let's focus on those things.
In my case, it's been a love of people and humanity, and for all the potential for humanity's good and our goodness to one another. And in my journey, in many cases when I've worked to do good, and sometimes it's backfired on me.
Absolutely.
I was like, like more times, and like, holy, it's do only good, do no harm, and then harm comes back and blame. And
you know what,
and then,
though? There's no perfection, even in nature and in the universe. So let's be happy with anywhere between 80 and 100%, right? And if we can do that and find what, again, is life-giving and focus on that and continue down that path, the harm that does come has only somehow made us stronger or better in hindsight.
Okay.
Because you're still here.
And if the harm comes in not at the 80 to 100%, but it's like 20 to 40%, it's like, ugh.
That's still 20 or 40, so how are you still there? If it's so bad, why not zero?
Yeah.
So again, right, it's looking at the abundance rather than the deficit.
So even if it's minus 20 or minus 40 or minus 80, it's still not over. We've got breath, we have presence.
There's always something.
There's always hope.
We can choose where we focus, and where we focus is where we go.
Yes, yes, yes. As a community, let's say a city, Toronto, or a fairly large metropolitan, what are some of the things that citizens could be more aware of?
Each other. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I'm walking and people don't even see each other or don't even know each other exists. I make it a point to stop, and if I see something wonderful about somebody, much like how you and I met,
Yes, yes.
is, just saying hello, and look at what can happen. And this is an example of a high quality connection.
Yes.
And there's science even on this out of the University of Michigan. So Jane Dutton's work and Kim Cameron's work and Robert Quinn. So I encourage anyone who wants to know more about high quality connections.
Can you speak about some of the fundamentals of high quality connections?
Yeah, high quality connections. I don't have the characteristics off my head, but what the gist of it is that it's not necessarily, our long-term relationships that we think of as high quality. It's even these fleeting moments that can be. There was some mutual reciprocity between us in our dynamic.
Yes.
It was able to withstand, like, how many times have you had to call me and, trying to get me to come down here? So we were able to sort of, have some tensility between our
busy schedules,
dynamics.
but yet
Absolutely,
desire.
we found a way to make it work,
Yes.
and we're both energized when we do connect.
Yes, yes.
So it just goes to show you that, we haven't known each other long, but yet there's a high quality connection here. And somehow we're changing things for each other. And, and I don't know, but outside, when you mentioned actually, when we were off camera, that you were still feeling energy even when we weren't connecting or talking.
Yes.
So there was some residual effect to that, and that's the beauty.
That actually is very true, and I hadn't articulated that or understood it, but I was being both pulled and driven by it.
Right. And so there goes to show you what a high quality connection residual effects can have. And that's the beauty of it. So just imagine walking down the street and being able to have more high quality connections with people.
As I walk down the street, there are times where I'm aware of people, sort of on the curb, of life. And, they may be asking, for money, or they're so broken down they're just standing, or sitting, not even connecting.
Yeah.
And what can citizens do to have some type of, rather than ignore, or have a handout, if there's a handout, with some type of connection, but where's the actual...
Just a hello. I think the worst thing in the world for a person, and that's any person, it doesn't matter if you're on the street or at work or at home, is when a person or a human being is being ignored. I think it's one of the hardest things. And I say that even from personal experience. And so, because I'm so aware of that, I will make sure that anybody in my presence, in my realm, is included or is acknowledged. It's just a simple acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So going down the street, smile.
Yeah.
You don't have time to stop and say hello? No problem. If you can do that, great. It's just little moments like that.
So even just giving that smile, even if one is not
Acknowledgement
able
that they
to...
exist. I see you. How does it make you feel, Hilton, when I look at you and I say, I see you?
Yes.
You're smiling.
Yes.
Right? It's
Yeah.
just instant. And that's what it is. Right?
Yes. And I guess in first responders, in many cases, we see them as so strong
Yeah.
and in that hero's journey,
Yeah.
and they'll often, protect, live up to that.
And they do, and they live it inside and outside of work.
But it can become a prison almost.
My husband is a hero, hands down.
Yes.
Absolutely hands down in
He
every
even looks
way.
like a hero
He
in-
does, doesn't he?
Yes,
Mr.
totally
April
amazing.
2017.
Oh, Mr. April, oh my gosh, yeah. Aren't you a fortunate woman?
I am. I'm a lucky girl. He is absolutely hero in every sense, in
Yes.
terms of the father that he is, the son that he is, the brother, the friend. I mean, you can count on him anytime, every time.
Yes.
And that's the nature, which I think also brought him to his calling, which is to be a firefighter.
Yes.
And I think it just became, I don't think he knew how to articulate or even notice that he had another side to him where, you know, where does he go when he's not, can't be the hero? And that's where now I have worked extremely hard to create a home environment that it is safe for every one of us. It doesn't matter who it is, the children, myself, or him. We have a safe place to be who we are in that moment, whether it's that being a hero or not. If we want to be broken or we are broken, it's okay to be broken. And it's safe to say so.
How does one actually build that in a home?
It's through our conversations, through the words that we use, the way that we approach each other, the way we connect. And that's, like I said, what I do now. And I help other families, couples, organizations create that within their environments. It's a human thing. I keep going back down to if there's one thing that's come clear to me is it's not just a first responder thing, although their community needs it very much.
Yes.
This is a human thing. And so I'm open to helping everybody and anybody that wants to explore what that looks like for them.
So you have a private practice.
I do.
SajelBellons.com.
Yeah.
It's SajelBellons.
No, Bellon.
Bell-
Bellon.
Bellon. Sajel, SajelBellon.com.
Yeah.
So what is your website? Tell us about what you do.
Not everything. Because there's only so much room.
Yes.
So right now it's really simple. It has me down as an occupational stress and trauma specialist. I've given access to my full bio so people can get a better understanding of where I'm coming from, the experience and background that I have, because it's very diverse. I have an adult education background, a business background, leadership background, organizational development background, mental health background. And that's what's given me the gift of being able to see this from a very systemic level and to build solutions that are actually going to work for the entire system. And that's how we're going to get real strategic and targeted at what we want to achieve and how we create sustainable outcomes. So that's so I've provided my CV and bio there, and really just I've spent a lot of time giving testimonials of people that have worked with me or that I've worked for, and to show how much they've appreciated what they've learned, what they've gotten out of it. I do professional speaking as well.
Yes.
That's where a lot of my time has been going, is to actually get out and get in front of people and speaking.
You have an upcoming TED Talk, don't you?
I do have an upcoming TED Talk, yes.
Can you tell us about that? What's that going to be about?
It's going to be about human connection. So I'm going to actually tell a little bit more about my story.
Yes.
And talk about some of the strategies we got in place and some of the learning of why this is so important. In terms of our conversations and connections. So really around the very similar themes. Yeah.
You know, in our community leaders, next month in Ontario, we have municipal elections.
Yes.
Including mayor and so on and so forth. So how could politicians, including the mayor, how could they benefit from or stand for, or what's necessary for them to actually be in action around this to better our city?
I think they need to have a really good scope, number one, at the systemic level, which I find many don't. They're an expert in what they're an expert in, and that's it.
Can you speak more of the systemic level?
So the systemic level is we have to have a really clear understanding of how all the systems work together within, whether it's municipal, federal, provincial. You need to have an understanding of how the services connect, how the front line goes out, how leaderships affect this, the financial aspect. You have to have a real good understanding of, again, how everything intertwines and connects. Because if one gear goes out of whack, it affects the whole system. So I really encourage leaders to understand and how to gain a systemic view of whatever area that they're in charge of and leading. I also really urge leaders and politicians to have a really keen understanding about the value of human connection and culture for the constituents that they represent. I also believe that they should have heart in what it is that they're driven to do and to work for the actual constituents, and to be mindful of agendas and how agendas can work together or work against each other. So they have to have a very clear understanding.
How important is it to reach in that systemic view, not only to first responders and all the professionals, but there are the at-risk citizens, whether at all levels, from youth to seniors.
Yeah, I've worked with all of them.
And as they fall sometimes, in between the cracks, then they also become, the receivers of emergency response.
Yes.
So isn't there work to be done there as well?
Absolutely, and that's why I'm saying to you that one thing that's become very clear, although my passion population is the emergency services, it's become very, very clear to me that really everybody can benefit from what I'm talking about. And I think if we as a society get a better understanding of each other's needs and creating spaces in which we all are coming from a place of understanding and safety.
And acceptance and
acknowledgement, absolutely. That it just creates better interactions. So then it becomes full circle, right? Our connectivity will lead to better interactions and better experiences, better life experiences. Definitely we have youth and seniors and marginalized communities falling through the cracks. We have first responders falling through the cracks. Yes. And the whole idea is what if we were to all connect so well that we essentially create a metaphoric safety net?
So even in our people that are institutionalized, whether it be mentally or criminally, there still then it's not always safe there.
No, and from both sides of the bars.
Yes.
So not only for the people that are institutionalized or behind bars, but we're also finding the same thing with corrections officers. We're actually finding the same thing with dispatch, people taking the calls. So it's like, how close are you to the trauma, and how close are you to being on the ground? And as like I said, it's not about uniforms anymore, and it's not about what we do. It's a human thing. How many times can the human mind be exposed? How many times can the human mind go through years of life and not have the ability to connect, to have real deep connection, or being heard, or feeling like you belong? So
one can be strong in the mind, but the heart becomes disconnected or almost broken down, or broken and hurt. And
emotionally,
yes.
Yeah, it's not always, we use the term psychological a lot, and people equate that with the brain, as you said.
Yes.
And we've also started using a new word called emotional management, because sometimes what affects our ability to communicate or connect is our emotional reactions to things.
Yes.
Like, for instance, what happened today on the phone. That could have easily escalated because, I was emotional. I knew where I needed to be, and he was emotional because he, wasn't sure what was going on, and,
And you were so elegant and eloquent of.
I was really proud of myself.
Look, I'm taking a lesson from you on that. I'm proud of you too.
I was really proud of it. And
Well
that's what
done.
I mean. And so this is a part of self-action, self-compassion in action.
Yeah, and
right?
it's a little bit of self-actualization as well.
And just recognizing, where I've come.
Yes.
Because it could have been a full-on blowout if we wanted it to be. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Are there, you've mentioned a number of people, but what about you writing a book or doing some other videos? What's
I've
up?
got like 3 books in my head.
Oh, really? Tell us.
Yes, so I'm working on a book right now called Fueling the Fire, which is about, Fueling the Flame, which is about sort of reigniting the relationship in after occupational stress or post-traumatic stress in a relationship, so how to navigate that. And then I have another one called Surviving the Fire, which can actually help individuals who are actually going through the journey and to recognize what's going on.
Yes.
And then to create a third book that's actually meant for leaders and from the organizational aspect to actually help to create the cultures of psychological safety so that we can minimize the amount of people that are going to be diagnosed with PTSI or OSIs.
What was the title of the third one again?
I haven't got it yet.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, you got that.
That's great. I'm so excited.
You're in tune right now. You're listening. So,
I'm looking for something for all the CEOs
yeah,
of, not only our country, but of the world.
absolutely.
Because, this is, it's integral to any community thriving.
Yeah. So
Every
it'll be something around the lines of cultivating cultures. That cultivating cultures through conversation or something like that. That's going to help CEOs, help leaders of any kind to really be those champions of creating better human experiences and connectivity.
All right. And with our current mayor and mayor probably to be, what would some of the things be that you'd want to say to him to consider and to maybe look at implementing to make our city a better city?
I don't know much about where he's coming from because I'm not a huge political person.
Understood.
However, what I have seen is very sort of instantaneous and hot and reactionary, and I would almost ask him to take a moment and pause,
Well done.
look and listen.
I
Yeah,
thank you for helping me and helping all of us pause
thank
to
you.
look for the divine and these divine times in the work you're doing. I can't thank you enough. It's inspiring and encouraging. And just keep on, carry on.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with
Thank
you
you
today.
so very, very much.
Thank you.
All the blessings. Thank you for tuning in to Divine Times. Let your light shine. This is Hilton Milan. Till again.